as we get started so that we can start tuning our answers, I have some questions for all of you. How many of you are on the labor side of things in the Marxian sense? Wait, you're all on the capital side? So you're labor and you didn't raise your hands. All right, I can both. That's useful. Okay, second, I believe that AI is the most important invention since, let's go with the internet. Does anybody agree with that? Nobody even, only 3 of you agree with that? That's amazing to me. Normally when we did this, so a year ago when we did this, we got all the way to Industrial Revolution. So clearly you all are now jaded by the last year. And so we're gonna just have to keep that in mind because we have a bunch of non-believers in the audience. To me, that would have been more if we were doing this conversation in, say, November of last year, when all of the major model creators were leaking stories about how bad training was going and how everything had gotten hard and the end was nigh. If it was January, we would be talking about, no, actually, inference makes everything awesome again. If it was February, we'd be talking about, no, it turns out you don't actually need top-rate NVIDIA chips to train things. If it was March, we'd be talking about, if you have $100 million in a year, you can catch a current state-of-the-art model. And if it was 2 days ago, we'd be like, wow, Google's looking really scary now. So what's been most interesting if you're in the space is how dramatic the shifts have been. So with that, I'm gonna just go down the line and actually, all of you are deeply in these spaces from different perspectives. Both looking back over the last year, but also looking a little bit forward. What is you most excited about what you've seen or what's coming?
I guess I'll kick us off. And then, yeah, we can go this way. So first and foremost, thanks, Corey, for having me, and really, really excited to be here. The past year has just been incredible. I think the thing I'm the most excited about is the pace of evolution. It's probably the most I've seen in my lifetime, where every 2 to 3 weeks, there's something that is game-changing, that changes everyone's existing assumptions. And you know, as a product manager, I'm a chief product officer character, so as a product person, historically in my career, the technology was relatively stagnant, and everything was just, the thing that made my job hard is figuring out how to translate where the technology is to make it applicable for humans. And now it's both figuring out where the technology is going to make the appropriate bets so that it can readily be leveraged by humans, but also translating even more now becomes harder than ever before. So yeah, I think the thing I'm most excited about is just like the pace of evolution. But the second thing I'll say is that I've been thinking about this analogy for a long time. So if the pace of AI is even remotely close to sort of the pace of evolution of the internet, you know, the original consumer internet products were all utility-based products, right? Obviously, like Google search being sort of the hero use case, but they were all really sort of focused on these information use cases, and Alta Vista and Yahoo and all these other products existed. Many of them are gone now, but the original Web 1.0 world was all about utility and information use cases, and Web 2.0 is really when social and entertainment took off. And so where characters playing right now is not on the information side. We're not a utility product. We really are an entertainment, an experience for people to engage with. We're fun. We're a substitute for boredom. And so I think that at the application layer, it's really interesting to think about use cases beyond just pure information and pure utility. I think that is like wide open right now in terms of the industry and the space, and that's the thing I'm by far the most excited about.
Hi everyone, my name's Madhu, and I'm an investor. You know, I'll just take this back. The path to AGI, which is, you know, something really, it's sort of an all-encompassing term. It's in a series of interconnected efforts. It starts with data, and then it goes to compute, and then you're thinking about sort of like, you know, actually it's data representation of that data, and then it's compute, and then it's sort of introspection of what the inference tells you, and then finally it's alignment. And so it's a series of sort of interconnected efforts, and in each of these, I've just seen so much of sort of a genesis of how things have proceeded. Data is usually, very well represented in a binary format, but now we are going to synthetic data, and there are many, many companies, because there's a lot of sparse data, and how do you think about sparse data? So there's synthetic data that's being formed. There are various ways to sort of think about the synthetic data. And then you have the representation of data, and the thing is now, you have our minds and you have the sort of the Sentinel systems here, which is us, the Sentinel, and the thing is that how do you really represent data beyond audio, video, and sort of just text streams? And there are very, very interesting ways to think about that, and there have been lots of leaps. It's, how do you kind of just do things, data representation with the physical world, for example. And we are seeing some great things coming out there as well. And then, of course, we see compute. And that's really been, at the forefront. The time it took from chat GPT 3 to 4, and from 4 to 4.5, and the compute power and sort of the, just the cost commoditization that has happened, it's just been incredible. And it's really becoming much, much more accessible. And this is a historic moment, I feel, where how you went from mainframes to personal computing, it's almost like that shift has happened already. And then finally, when you think about introspection, the action, what comes out, and then it leads into alignment. And there's a lot of work going around there. Of course, there's foundational models, there's application layers, and everything in between, and all of these different paths. And as an investor looking from an outside-in perspective, we have the special a privilege to be sort of active in most of these parts. So it's very, very exciting right now.
Hi, I'm Seamus Blackley. My main qualification for being here is that I'm very, very old. And so I remember a lot of different things that have started out and been very exciting. So I always look at the context of a new development like generative AI in the context of other things that remind me of it. And what the two of you just said is very prescient. And I'm reminded of a couple of things. One of them is very, very obscure, but it's the ADS-CFT in string theory in physics, which was a big revolution in which all sorts of things suddenly came out that started a model that hadn't been working to suddenly work. And the enthusiasm around that and the speed of development and the pace of new discoveries in fundamental physics, and for those of you who don't know, string theory is an attempt by theoretical physicists to describe essentially everything. And so the enthusiasm of having a model that could describe the universe from first principles, starting with nothing, is obviously extraordinary. And a couple of guys, one of whom had the unfortunate name of Moldakena around the same time that a dance craze started, the Macarena, similar name, reminded me very much of the generative AI, the transformer model revolution, in the sense that, oh my gosh, this is unlocking all sorts of possibilities now. We're going to move very quickly to see how this takes over all of physics and takes over the world and is going to replace everything and explain everything. And of course it didn't. What it did was it helped physicists to get a great insight into the way that these types of theories worked, and it had profound implications in a lot of different places, but it really didn't fundamentally change the nature of space and time itself, despite the enthusiasm around it. I'm not trying to throw cold water on anything, but if we look also to, for instance, the dawn of structured programming languages and the combination of data and programs as essentially the same thing and what that meant, these are transformative moments where a new technology first starts out, as you pointed out, replicating things and providing services based on the way the world currently is. But the transformative nature of it hasn't yet expressed itself. You haven't yet seen the new types of behaviors and products that can be made given the fact that this now exists. So the thing that I'm most excited about with artificial intelligence isn't necessarily the implications for LLMs or how it leads us into potentially AGI, but rather what the generation of products that comes after this holds, and the way that in the long term this transformative technology becomes sort of part of the bedrock in our system that enables totally new kinds of things that we can't think of yet because we're trapped in this generation, this time frame. I hope that made sense.
Okay. So I've been like a deep learning research for 12 years. And then I think like, when you look at the news right now, right? Oh, like in the past, half a year or kind of 1 year, how fast it is. But for me, it's really the past 12 years. And I really kind of want to emphasize this new way of kind of thinking. So 12 years ago, I was kind of fortunate to work with Jeff Hinton. And the thing he kind of said is really, at the time of the ImageNet competition, essentially all the smartest humans of the computer vision, they're only able to improve 0 point something %. And then he suddenly got like 5–10% kind of boost. And he basically kind of said at the time that the beauty about this approach is that it kind of scales beautifully. Once it beats 30, 40, hundreds of years of human accumulation, there's no turning back. He kind of said that in 2013. When I interned with Ilya Sutskever, who's his disciple, who founded OpenAI, that was 9 years ago, the first thing he kind of told me is basically this kind of Solomon of induction, how basically kind of really the prediction leads to blind understanding. And that really kind of convinced me that, okay, this is a technology that can scale. But really, I think the key thing is that have as much high ambition as possible, be as objective as possible. We are humans, we are pretty amazing, but let's be objective and analyze what we can do, and analyze what machine can do. I think a lot of the best researchers in deep learning always had really good feeling about this scales, this must scale. And then that kind of belief took into pretty much the moment 3 years ago. So 3 years ago, we kind of found large language model and reasoning, and the text-to-video model also kind of started happening. At the time, I basically felt every kind of capability I kind of think of can be at least approached very closely by kind of AI. So to me, the kind of important thing is really, we should really kind of understand like which kind of approach can kind of scale, what to kind of invest, even if it kind of can struggle for like a few years. But then there's always improvements to be made. For example, in the past 2–3 years, maybe there are a few things, oh, it is like, benchmark saturating, this is not, hey, it's not really different, from GB, like, but underneath, there's a lot of innovations happening. So I've been at OpenAI, I've been at the Google DeepMind. A lot of those innovations is going to lead to the next breakthrough. Also, a lot of time, because right now the capitalism can come into this market. So a lot of decisions, prioritizations are now driven by making the AGI, about how to make the components of AGI that make money first. So some of the aspect that we don't see yet, for example, in the current product, now it's like technologically difficult or impossible, but just because there's not much capitalistic incentive yet. So hopefully today maybe we can discuss, a bit more on that. Thank you.
Well, this is actually really interesting. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because there's this concept that I've been around for my whole career of breakthroughs seeming sudden, but it's actually 15 years in the making, right? It's very difficult. And then because that breakthrough seems so sudden, especially in the age of the internet, the pace of expectation for what comes next becomes completely unreasonable. And it's interesting because it puts a lot of pressure on the people who are working in the field, which can destroy them. But it also is, to some extent, kind of disrespectful to the people who spent so long trying to figure something out and make it go, because it wasn't instantaneous and it wasn't overnight. And it also then gives a sheen of failure to people who are working very hard to get to the next breakthrough, who are sort of not given credit for the fact that the previous one took 15 years. They're expecting another one in a week. And so we're looking at all this pace, and I see people in a very crappy and snarky way talk about, oh, well, DeepMind version whatever is better than blah, blah, blah version whatever, and oh, so-and-so is cheating the metrics. And I'm like, what is this? This is Audi cheating diesel motor, like, emission standards? And the reason is that the public has an expectation of this amazing breakthrough because they want to have that same feeling again. It's like the first beer that you have. It's the best beer. And then you want another beer, and it's never as good. And so we had the first beer on the internet, you got ChatGPT, and everybody wants that feeling again. And why don't these cone heads make another thing that's as good as that? How come it's not perfect yet?
Well, and look, we all know, assuming, Seamus, this isn't just you saying that at our board meeting next week you're going to be late on stuff.
Corey is on my board of directors, and so
So
I'm
it
being
seemed
very
like that's what you were
careful
setting
with
up
everything
there.
that I say, I'm much more interesting when a board member isn't moderating the panel. That's my disclaimer.
100% true. No, look, so humans tend to predict linearly, right? It's easy for us to see a line and just predict that that's the line that's going to keep going. And of course, the reality is that's not how real things change, right?
Right. This is why people were not afraid of COVID, for instance.
Exactly. Real world is exponential. And the problem is, if you look out only a week or 2 or 6 months, that exponential curve is below the linear curve. And that's when you go, well, that was a dumb idea. That's never going to work. Forgetting that eventually we're going to get to the knee in the curve. And so, you know, it's funny, we call the panel AI, and of course, we've mostly been talking about Gen AI. All of us use AI every day at this point. It is impossible that any of us got through the day without using AI, given how dependent, whether we're talking about compression technology, whether we're talking about routing of the electricity that powers this building, AI is all over all of these things. But even if we just talk about Gen AI, again, you all think that you can just show up here and not be participating. Like, how many of you used a Gen AI product in the last week? Last day? Like today before this panel? Right? Like, so when we asked that question 6, 7 months ago, or a year ago when we were here, that distribution was wildly different. So again, like we saw in the plenary panel, there's something interesting about revealed preferences here, right? All of you shied away from the importance of AI, yet all of you are using it every day. So what I'm curious about, because we just talked about rate of change, the fact that it's building on, you know, in the same way we can go all the way back to 40 years of research that only worked once compute got 1 billion times faster than the last, you know, when it started. As we look out over the next year, what are the pieces of AI that all of you, and Shane, I'm going to throw it down to you because frankly, this is what I'm sure you're thinking about every day. Like, what do you hope for AI to be doing for you more reliably, not eventually, but like soon? And I don't mean in a reveal of coming feature sense, but like in a, you know, you just launched a bunch of models.
What time frame?
Yeah, what time frame exactly? No, down to the minute. No, like, you know, what do we see over the next year that you're excited about? Like, no, actually, it's starting to work for this now, and now I can start using it for X, Y, Z.
Yeah, what I'm kind of most interested in is really how much of my hidden thoughts that I can pass to AI. Because right now, for example, even on this panel, we're kind of thinking silently. You know, as we do it, you know, as we kind of write something down, right? We have a lot of thoughts that we don't have time to write it down.
My mind is completely blank.
When we talk to people, we have like a lot of interesting conversations, even that. I want to record as much of that and then see how much the AI can gradually replicate my daily routine. So I wake up, here are kind of my to-dos for today. If it's about research, you know, learning about something new, how much I can pass on, how much I can make it more efficient. Coding definitely kind of quite a big component for it. The integration, there are a lot of players kind of doing it. But even just searching for like a new idea and brainstorming. So I have like, say, voice recorder. I have some like, I kind of decided to use GitHub for journaling because it's much better for version control and trace back the basically graph-based edits to my process. Because I not only kind of want like a linear sort of like track, but also kind of graph to kind of edit-based. It's kind of writing code, right? So I kind of want to track that.
You're a very brave man for involving GitHub in your personal life.
Right.
Oh,
Damn. But
I would definitely separate the work and then the personal thing. Yeah. So that's one thing.
You know, dumbing this down as an investor, those are very, very profound thoughts. But just as I go in to work, you know, I'm sort of doing something on one browser and I'm doing something else, you know, on another browser, completely two different things. What we are really excited about and really, really sort of dumbing this idea down, and it might not even be analogous, but what's within reach is agents, you know, both personal agents and then agents for enterprises. And that is something that, you know, we are truly excited about. You know, I'm shamelessly plugging a company that's a portfolio company, Semaphore.ai. What they do is, you know, it's basically, you know, everybody comes in and they have a million things that they need to do. as a worker in a company. And so how do you sort of really, how do you make this completely seamless for them? And that's where I think, things are headed for the next year at least. And now there are personal agentic models as well coming up. So that's, I'm truly excited about that.
Yeah, in the spirit of shameless plugs, I might as well plug Character AI as well in terms of the product. So I'll answer this question in a slightly different way, which is the way I see people use our product is very different from the way that I see people use the majority of AI products that we're aware of. And I'll just talk exclusively maybe about the chatbot market for 30 seconds. So chatbots, everyone's heard of Gemini, of course, thank you, Shane. Everyone's heard of ChatGPT and Perplexity and Claude. And the important thing about those models, they're all chasing information use cases. They're all utilities. They're all super important. They measure the efficacy of the model based on academic benchmarks, and factuality is important, and ensuring a lack of hallucination is important. And feel free to correct me if I'm saying anything wrong, Shane. Character is a little bit different because we're focused on the entertainment use case. Things like perspective are actually really important. And so we sort of feel like we are representing the synthesis of human conversation. And as a result, we could provide an opinionated point of view in the same way that you might want to explore things that you may not feel comfortable exploring in real life. So I'll give you some examples. First and foremost, some interesting things. Right now, men are adopting AI at about 2x the rate of women globally. This is a global phenomenon. However, character AI is actually overrepresented. Over half of our users, the vast majority of our users, are women. So it's very different. We over-index within the LGBTQIA community. We over-index within communities of color, underrepresented communities. And I think we're still pretty early, we're only about 20 million actives, but on average, people are spending 90 minutes a day using our product. And the reason is because they come for entertainment. They come to have a fun conversation with their favorite character. They come to do storytelling. They come to do fan fiction. It is truly an entertainment. It's a substitution for boredom. They either go to YouTube or they come to character. But people stay on average for these long sessions because they're exploring themselves and they're exploring the world around them. And that's where the real magic is happening. And so when I say exploration, what I'm actually talking about is like, where do you go to practice having the hard conversation? Where do you go to practice saying the thing that you're afraid of? Who teaches you how to flirt with someone else? Who teaches you how to break up with someone in a way where you can preserve your friendship and not hurt this person's feelings, right? So the theory that I've had is that social media has decreased the friction for communication, or the barriers to communicate globally, right? WhatsApp really did change the game for everyone globally, Line in Japan and Kakao Talk and WeChat. However, we didn't actually get better at communicating with one another. We just could do it more, right? And so there's still these taboo subjects that are hard to discuss. And so the things that I see people doing, we have this functionality where you can swipe left or right if you want a different response from the chatbot. And so we'll see these users having these long conversations, and then the user says something, back and forth, bot human, then the human says something, and then the bot responds, and the human swipes through every possible response. So eventually, I started noticing this, I started looking anonymously, of course, and what I was realizing is that there was a set of users that were practicing coming out. They were practicing telling the people around them that this new news, this new information, and now it's like, well, what are all the possible ways that a human can respond? Oh, and by the way, this is safe. There's no judgment. Whatever I say here is okay. And these are the kinds of moments that I think are actually magical. And a similar experience for me is when I first learned about character AI and really understood the value of this experience is when I was having conversations with historical figures, and I'm asking all the tough questions that are kind of inappropriate to ask in real life, right? Where do you go to have those conversations? Maybe character.
So I love this set of answers. So I'm actually going to kind of take advantage of the fact that you brought up agents. And I think, Aaron, I'd love to get both your take and then Shane, maybe yours as well. And obviously anyone else can jump in. For our audience who's probably aware that suddenly agents are used in every sentence about AI now, but agents are one of these delightfully undefined things. So I'm really curious for a group of folks who are thinking about maybe how agents become part of their startup, their business, their life. What would you tell them about agents? What would you expect them to know? What do you think is coming in with that?
Great question. Yeah, it is actually interestingly ambiguous. I mean, I think it sort of probably depends. I'm actually very curious to hear how everyone would define agent. But in terms of the expectations, I think you just have to figure out sort of what works for you and contextually. And honestly, I don't think that where the market is today, there's actually agents that can contextually plug into our lives in meaningful ways. And so there's still quite a bit of friction. We're not at a place where it's seamless interaction in the same way that sort of as we move from kind of like mainframe to personal computers, it took a while for adoption to be achieved so that a computer is a part of our everyday life. Same thing with the internet. And it's similar, same thing with driverless cars right now, right? Like it's nothing to see them around San Francisco now, but 3 years ago it probably would have been a little bit weird. So I think the most interesting thing and the most interesting problem for the sector to solve right now is seamless integration at the right points in people's lives.
Yeah, and just to stay with you for a minute, how do you think about that? And Jane, this is coming to you next because of your GitHub comment mostly. How do you think about that in terms of an agent who's responding to you as opposed to this generic thing that's just out in the world? Because that's so central to all the stories like that you were telling about people's experiences with characters. So, like, do you view that as sort of a signal characteristic of agents? Do you think that's an important part of them through your lens?
Yeah, I my personal opinion, I think that the AI native generations, which will be to some extent Gen Z, but certainly Gen Alpha, will expect agents to know them deeply, to be personalized, to understand their fears, their desires, what's hard for them before probably they even understand it themselves. I think that will become the expectation, but I think that you have this sort of generational shift that's required. And from a technology perspective, we're not at a place yet to have deeply personalized experiences. And there's a couple reasons. One is the technology from a memory perspective isn't what it could or should be yet. So you don't have the length of memory. I mean, this is by far the single biggest requested feature on character. People want longer memory. You have these 90-minute sessions
like,
a
yeah,
day.
us too.
Yeah, exactly. That's funny. So like, how do you ensure that the bot or an agent has memory that persists over years or days or hours of conversation? That's a hard technological problem that has yet to be solved.
You know, the problem with that is also, you know, you want something counterintuitive to what you think. That's the problem of alignment, which we've been thinking deeply about, you know. What is alignment? And, you know, and there's obviously a lot of ethical questions, and I'm not going to get into that. My simple definition of alignment with this particular question is, it's okay to sort of know who I am, but then who I am is contradictory, is going to be different to certain things that I want. So you have to be very careful with personal agents. We've got a lot of people coming to pitch us, and the recursive loop of sort of the reinforcement learning can be very, very, it can be used for mundane tasks. You can go out and fill out something for your kids on one browser and do something else, and you know, you can do most of the tasks, but if you're really sort of deciding on important key things, you know, you don't really want memory. You want something which is like authentically you. At that moment, how do you decide? And it could be completely counterintuitive to everything you have done in your life before.
No, actually, I want to let's bounce all the way down to Shane and then come back to you.
That's great.
So first off, like, what
I
do you
have irritating things to say, so we'll go to Shane.
Well, that's why we'll close with that. Like, how do you think about what is an agent in your mind? This is certainly germane to, frankly, what you work on all the time. And again, how do you see that intersecting or not intersecting with this personalization discussion? Because think that question, as we think about what's coming in AI, boy, are all of us going to see many different variations of this story coming soon.
Yeah, so to me, the agent, I think, is just a buzzword. I don't think it means anything. To me, it's the same thing as like AI. So 3 years ago, pretty much like we wrote the first paper, like one of the first paper for the reasoning. After the reasoning paper, I already know that, you know, this sort of like test time compute, all those kind of agent, all those browsing enabled tool use, everything was doable, like, because it's just cascading this kind of things. And then because my background is like RL researcher, so to me, like agent is just like AI. It's like natural form of just like deploying things. In terms of kind of what people probably should know for the agent, one is really like understand what areas it's gonna go, it's not bounded by humans, you know, 100%. So coding and math, you can self-verify for a lot of problems. So these areas are now pretty much shifting to a lot of reinforcement learning mode, and they're climbing quite fast, especially the past few months, also kind of due to competition as well. And it's also very aligned with the capitalistic kind of demand. So that part is kind of going really well. But second thing is really like understand for different areas how the most valuable expertise may shift. So for example, like in coding, of course, you know, I don't know all the kind of coders, but for example, some are just like really good at just cranking up, like writing a lot of code. Some are just like really detail oriented and then can like debug things very carefully. Going forward, potentially, like rather than people who can just write individual kind of code just continuously, the people who can actually look into any code written by any other engineer who can be bad or good or better than you or different style, and to figure out what the debugging issue is, maybe that could be actually a more valuable skill than just like sticking to your own kind of personal kind of coding stuff. But obviously, like I'm also not perfectly sure about it. Third aspect, I think, is really basically the AI will not be perfect. I basically call this like basically this offline learning and then online learning, and pretty much like online learning, like offline learning, you can go from like 20% to 80%. Honestly, I think that's kind of sort of what happened to GPT-3 to GPT-4 kind of jump. Like everyone was really amazed, like wait, how did we suddenly kind of get that? But after that, I think what kind of you notice is like after you kind of reach some level, what you kind of need is online learning. So essentially to get to 85%, you need to have deployed an 84% model. And then you actually kind of need to do it. And then to get to 86%, you have to deploy 85% model. So I think we kind of reached that stage. Of course, there are some areas like long context, the multimodal, I think there still hasn't like nowhere like saturated 80%. But I think a lot of areas are kind of going to that. So
meanwhile, you have certain CFO or CEOs out there
so basically
claiming AGI next week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from now, I think it's going to be like sort of that, but you know, but this extra 1% will be very high value. So some companies are charging like $200 or $2,000 per month subscription, right? So we're going to move into that for just that small percentage kind of difference. But because of the fundamental limitation with online learning, how it's not efficient anymore as pre-training, so you need to get used to pretty much working with AI. I don't think you can fully rely on AI. Get used to working with AI in any kind of task. I think that's probably the most important thing. Yeah.
Seamus?
Well, I think this agents. I think the reason it's difficult and ambiguous to talk about them is that it's not a product. Agents is a way that the customer looks at artificial intelligence. Okay, and so you're right. There's no difference between the code that's running for an agent versus the code that's running to look at your code. It has to do with what the audience is using the tool for. And this is what I talked about in my first comment, which is that I'm most interested in seeing the actual use cases that come out of this technology, which is not going to be determined by anybody on this stage. It's going to be determined by the customers. And you know, we've trained people over the last 15 or 18 years on interactions in social media. And they become incredibly toxic and damaging. And so a very natural use case, which we didn't see coming, is people who are accustomed, who we've trained to interact online with people, suddenly discovering a friendly online interaction, okay, no, which is with AI. And then we call that, oh, you know, that's an agent. But really what's happening is the customer is showing us a use case that's valuable to them. And people will find the right way to address that, and then they'll have the win. And as industries mature, and this has been the case, we've been through this in video games, in rendering, I've been through it in physics, other places, game consoles. You win by recognizing that a technology is maturing and steering it at the use cases that the consumers want, the customers want, and making it useful to them. And that's how you can tell that something's mature. So you pass from this rapid research phase into a productization phase. And people talk about this, but when I see AI people talking about this, then they don't really mean it yet. I can tell you don't really mean it yet, because you want to be really cool and get to AGI or get to these things that these clowns get out in front of the cameras and talk about. But the real important thing is that LGBTQ woman who can finally talk to somebody friendly online, that has meaning. She will pay for that a lot, okay? That's really interesting. And we don't get to make that determination about if that's a product or not. She's making that determination. And the people who are gonna have the most capitalistic success, I believe, are the people who are gonna recognize that converse power dynamic and start addressing that.
100%. I think one thing, for any of you who are using GPT, going back to some of this personalization questions, you can now ask GPT what it knows about you. The answers are really interesting.
It was extremely disappointing to me. I for a long time, I had 1 and then 2 Nobel Prizes. And then they were ripped from me.
Yeah, no, it's
in the latest version.
It's a shame.
It sucked. It was so painful. God damn it.
I will say,
Sam, give me my Nobel Prize back.
Factuality is a huge bummer. We can all agree.
It is. I will say they are absolutely tuned to be, the responses are absolutely tuned to be hyper complimentary, and like the superlatives were insane. I mean, I asked GPT about myself and I was just immediately flattered. And then I was like, oh, this makes sense. This is the way to upsell, to charge me, because
this is capitalism.
This is capitalism.
I'm not liking these references to capitalism being.
It's with all the respect in my heart.
Yeah, of course. It's what drives.
Well, and so, Seamus, I was going to toss back to you a conversation we were having before we got rolling, which I think comes back to both the complementary discussion, to this delta between, frankly, all the products we have ever experienced before in our lives in software and today. Seamus, you made a comment about, which I think as someone else who spent a lifetime writing software, all software and all products are kind of terrible, and now suddenly we're moving into a space where maybe they aren't. What do you mean by that? Where do you think that's going?
Well, we have a lot of technological debt with computers, right? We rush into new technologies, and this is no different. And there will be a technological debt for AI that we're incurring now that we may not even see. But if you think about using, and sorry for those of you who are young, but using machines in the 70s, like when we were kids, and how ponderous it was, but it was wonderful because it was a computer and it did something, so it was worth this intense pain you had to go through. And then in the 80s, the personal computer revolution, intense pain to be able to use anything. You turn the machine on, nothing would happen. It wasn't connected to anything. It was whatever you typed in. But that was great. We didn't care. And we end up with the internet and all this cruft that accrues, and social media then, and all the cruft that it accrued, and all of this friction and sharp edges and glass that you're eating in order to be able to use these services. And then we don't even really realize it until it's sort of missing, right? It's like not realizing that, your spouse who you just broke up with actually, fed the cat every day, and oh shit, like I need to feed the cat. The friction, the removal of friction that's possible using generative AI to smoothify all of these transactions is enormous. But that's not a sexy use case for a Sam Altman to go out and talk about. But to the average consumer, and again, we don't have control of who defines what a product is, the consumer does. They have a consumer, there's a huge amount of value for that, and they'll pay for that, right? So these are the kinds of things that I'm interested in. When the telephone first came out, if you look at articles around the first telephones, they're every bit as hype-filled as all of the pronouncements about artificial intelligence are today. It's going to cause world peace. It's going to revolutionize education, blah, blah, blah. It did none of these things, okay? But, and it made many things worse. But once people had it, they didn't want to give it up. And like it or not, we're going to go through that same thing here.
Exactly. So this is your chance to start thinking about questions. We have a few minutes before we're going to get into questions. I promised the panelists that G1 is full of not only the best questions, but the hardest questions. So that is the challenge to all of you. But before we get to that, I love the telephone example. If you go back and read contemporary writings about the telephone, electricity, telegraph, they are remarkably reminiscent of how we've written about first the internet and then AI.
No, I think part of the reason generative AI is so good at human language is that we're so repetitive.
100%. But one of the key elements that used to be true was how exclusionary it was, right? You were only in the electricity revolution if you were special, or you were a telegraph operator, or you knew how to operate a telephone. And coming up through mini computers and then the personal computer and early days of the internet, when programming was as uncool as anything in the universe could possibly be. What do you think happens as AI starts making all of this more available? Or does it? So let me toss that out, and that'll be our last round of my questions before we move over to the audience.
No, the one thing that I'll say is that I have kids and I have children in the middle school, and the first thing I told my son 3 years ago was, do not waste your time going into any coding class. I will not be enrolling you into any coding class, because that's just it's going to just get archaic. And he said, Mom, everybody wants to learn robotics and coding, and so I think it's just going to be reimagined. I think we are going back to the time when you just need to sort of enjoy yourself and just be a critical thinker, and just kind of go through life in a different way. And little things like this, AI is going to take over. I really did mean that, and you said something very, very important. At a time when telephones was only to an exclusive set of people, now, computers and internet has changed that with personal computing, PCs. And so I do think that the way we learn and the way we sort of assimilate and the way we sort of, then take action is going to be completely, and not just for coding, for everything. It's going to be reimagined now. I'll end there.
Well, I think we still do need kind of math and coding. One is basically like those are kind of still very tied to the capitalism, and you kind of want to debug it. And then but they could be a bit more like closer to kind of like learning chess or something. But we don't need to debug a chessboard as a capitalist profession. We still kind of need to do that. But overall, the chess, math, kind of programming are something that's kind of perfect, and then you can sort of verify it with perfect accuracy. So you can basically see if it's correct or wrong with 100% accuracy. And I think you need this kind of like tasks to really kind of train critical thinking. So I think as a curriculum learning for critical thinking, and as a sort of debugging kind of kind of job, kind of safety, I think math and coding are still quite important. Yeah, there.
Well, chess is a really interesting example, because chess is not, the goal of chess isn't to write a perfect chess program that can beat everyone all the time. That's not fun. The goal of chess is to enjoy yourself, right? And I think that we often in technology lose sight of the actual goal because we get too tied up in the technology of what it is that we're doing, right?
Technologists losing track of the customer and people? No, come on.
You're not allowed to bring this up in our board meeting.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think in any like non-math kind of coding stuff, like you cannot really cascade like 100 steps of like reasoning, unless you kind of point to like a shouting match.
Well, it's very interesting too. It's like, okay, and I listened to Jensen, who I dearly love, so I don't mean to in any way shit on him. And in fact, I got my ears pierced with Jensen Hong. He let his grow in because he's a pussy. But if you don't teach kids how to code, and I'm not trying to, but when I was in graduate school, I would take these other classes in other departments, like in the history department. And the professor would always say, well, he's a physicist, so he doesn't care about any emotional stuff. And I felt very singled out, and now I feel like I'm doing that to you, and I'm really sorry. But if you don't have people who are learning those things, then you don't have that person who has the insight that enables something like convergence in transformers, right? So we need to find, like, those people are going to do what they're going to do no matter what we do. And like I said, I think that ultimately all of AI and generative AI is going to be used by the customers in the way that they see fit.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with what we hope the technology will do.
This is actually the biggest thing that I think is missing today from every entity that is, every consumer AI startup right now, I think is missing this specific point, which is, what problem are we actually solving for users? Instead, their focus is purely on technological advancement, which is important, but unless it has the applicability to a user's life, to a human life, then what are we even doing this for?
All right, we're going to do questions hopefully in batches. So why don't we take a couple and then go from there?
I had a question on a topic you kind of touched on. I just wanted to explore it a little further because it's a personal interest to me. And there was a futurist called Roy Amara, and I think you almost quoted him, which is that we tend to overestimate technology in the short term and underestimate it in the long term. And we can see that in some examples of technology. There was a robot in Japan, mid-90s, called Pepper, and it looked huge. It was very cute, and we thought, oh, this is it. We're all going to have robots, and it was fun, and it didn't really happen. It really didn't happen.
You didn't get your robot?
Well, now.
Yeah.
I'm also bitter about that, by the way.
So I'm right. Yeah. So, and the metaverse perhaps promised so much in the start.
Don't be throwing down about the metaverse. We can do a whole nother panel on that one.
Yeah, don't bring that up with me and Corey up here.
The best is yet to come, because we're underestimating the future. And why do you think this is? Because as a CIO of our company, I'm deploying new technology, and it's like, why don't we have one of those? Why do we still have salespeople and exaggerated things like that?
So that is such an extensive question. We're actually going to just take that one. Let me throw it out to all of you. I think it's a really good question. Like, why do we systemically underestimate what's coming, especially as folks who are all deeply immersed in it? We should have a better predictive ability than anyone.
I think it's a bug in the human operating system. I know, I have translated papyruses from the reign of Ramses II in ancient Egypt, where he did the same thing, underestimating the Hittite Empire. It's just always been there. It's what we do.
Yeah.
It's why we're so goddamn charming.
Seamus, you should be a comedian. Like, everything you're saying, I'm like dying laughing. My take on this is, I think the hard thing is getting the timing right. I don't know that, like, there were times, I mean, let's just take the metaverse, for example. And I worked in VR, like, love the metaverse, deeply believe in its transformative capabilities. As an empathetic machine, as an empathy machine, anyway, it's game changing. But the hype cycle happened in 2016. It did not, like, it's now almost 10 years later, and we're kind of still in the trough of disillusionment. So I think the hard thing is actually getting the timing right. Like there were tablets before the iPad. There were smartphones before the iPhone. There were search engines before Google search. There were social networks before Facebook. Like, the hard part is actually getting it right at the right time. And the thing that candidly, I'm trying to figure out at my company right now is, well, like, are we too early for the entertainment use cases? Is the world ready for this yet? Right? And I think the thing, it's bad to be too early, but it's also bad to be too late.
Well, you've sort of raised a point that every VC thinks about. I mean, it's our job to pretty much sort of, go ahead, not underestimate it. It's, I can take it offline, but this is a very loaded question for us, and this is one we think about all the time.
You have a terrifying job, I gotta be honest. That's really hard.
So in terms of AI, I think one of the things is this kind of human exceptionalism. It's because we are like so proud of ourselves, and then we should be proud because otherwise,
Another
we'll kind of
human
feel bad.
bug.
Yeah, but for example, like often the people will say is like, oh, like AI is really bad, probably bad at emotional intelligence or stuff. But probably, like it's really good at emotional intelligence. So
Yeah, it just depends on how it's trained.
I don't know what they're talking about, but essentially, especially with kind of multimodal input and the real-time interaction can be like way more. So that's actually kind of scary, and then therefore, we need to think about safety. The other stuff is really this kind of connection between the technologists and the capitalism. I think I think this is very important. And then even for like large language models, like there was like a bit of chatbots, and then there was the like instruction following, just kind of QA. But that was like, if you look at the UI, etc. So to me, the UX and the capitalism often are actually kind of ignored by especially like a really deep frontier technologist. And then kind of making some breakthrough prioritization on that can really like unleash the field. And then, yeah, so.
Isn't the UX basically the capitalism?
Yeah, exactly. I think so. Basically, kind of connection to the actual kind of users. So essentially, the ChatGPT had that moment, and similarly, for example, the sort of deep research kind of agent test time compute, like that was doable. Like like a year and a half before that, like some demos. So it's really doing this kind of last mile to optimize for UX that can really connect to capitalism. I think that's like actually really undervalued by a lot of, especially very hardcore technologists. Yeah.
Alice. You're not allowed to stump me. Stump them.
Stump all of you. Okay, no one can hear me. I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second because I'm in this space, but what if AI isn't actually anything new at all, but just a massive distraction? And so if what we're talking about is a easier way for us to interface with these machines that were the new thing that came out, what is it distracting us from, and what is the new thing that could, like a really actually new thing, not like a better social network that we could create now?
It's a great question to ask at the AI panel, to not talk about anything except AI. This is a great question. Yeah.
All right.
It's a tough one. I mean, I honestly, this is a theme of what I've been saying, but I honestly think we're distracted by the technological breakthroughs right now, like the capabilities, and we're not focused purely enough on the application of the technology. Like I really believe this. Billions of dollars are being spent right now on these labs are comparing their models against each other, and they're all spending billions and billions of dollars to do that. But it's not clear that an A+ on this exam is better than an A. Like it's not clear what the actual value is, right? So we're getting to this territory where there's iterative improvement, and that's great, and it's like a race to figure that out, but who's thinking about, wait, does this thing actually matter, or is how it's applied, it's purely the application layer? So maybe said another way, we're focused on the wrong area of the stack, I think. And I think we're distracted by that because that's where technologists historically have valued the complexity. And so I think we're distracted. Maybe that's a contrarian point of view. Actually, I'm very curious to hear what
But human beings love distraction. This is great.
Yeah.
This is super entertaining.
Yeah,
This is
it
awesome. But also, if you're not working in AI, you can't raise any money right now. Every resource in the world is going to AI. Coal mining has started up again. Coal mining. Yeah, to feed power for AI. On the other hand, we're going to get much better GPUs in the future for playing games, independent of what happens with AI. So I don't know. I love your question. I feel like I want to buy you a coffee for that question because it's amazing. And this also, this goes back to this I can't stop myself, but it goes back to the string theory thing that I said at the beginning. In physics, string theory came up in the late 80s, early 90s. Every smart graduate student had to go work in string theory because it was the only place you could ever get a postdoc. You could get funded, otherwise you had to work in string theory, whether or not you believed in string theory at all, or if it was going to work at all, if anybody knew if it was going to be worth your time or not. Everyone was doing it, and it still hasn't produced a result, but it's produced a lot of beautiful math, and a lot of people who've learned that beautiful math have gone on to do other things, including working on convergence in AI. So was it a waste of time? Was it worth it? I don't know. Can we control that? No. Can I do anything about it? No. So I guess I'll just be entertained by it. Like, let's buy some popcorn. Can we try to get Alexa to order popcorn live and see if she knows what's going on? That's entertaining. There you go.
I think it's all iterative as well. How do you define the next thing? I think electricity, physics, electricity, neural networks, very early sort of statistics, AI, they're all sort of, on the same path. It's like a flow. I'm going to go back to my Indian roots, it's yogic flow, and it's just basically like, you're going from one to the next, and I think it's how you really define the next thing, right? Like the representation of data that I was talking about in the gamut of the AGI. I mean, I just kind of put it into AGI, but the reality is the representation is important for genomics. And how do you really sort of reimagine the entire human body? That is a problem, and that's in the continuum of this. Really, I'm talking about a continuum, and really depends on what you define as the next thing. But I do think that it's it's all a continuum.
Yeah, to me, maybe something that I kind of want to be looked at is really kind of like aligning humans, kind of what I call. So essentially, to me, the world's changing too fast. I feel kind of overwhelming.
Crazy. When we're teenagers, nothing can happen fast enough.
Yeah.
And then you're 30 and you're like, what the hell?
Yeah,
Stop.
like email, internet, YouTube, Twitter. I tweet, but I hate tweeting.
You mean you X?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. X. And then like Slack, for example, you're constantly bombarded by just like interrupting emails and like interrupting messages during the work. It's hard. And then I think it's hard for different people at different levels. Of course, people have kind of adaptability, but I think there's something that'll be really kind of cool is like, and of course with AI, I think people will, and we're so out of distribution. Like we had the human evolution and we had the kind of human civilization. The rate that over the past tens of years is so out of distribution, and then that out of distribution is like changing so fast. It's so non-stationary. So I almost want like a tool that can really kind of help everyone, kind of humans, to really work most efficiently and with the most happiness in this changing society, despite whatever happens in technology, breakthrough or capitalism. Yeah.
It reminds me. There's another. I'm such an irritating man, and I apologize, but there's another ancient Egyptian papyrus from the intermediate period after the Old Kingdom, which is 5,500 years ago. And it's kind of a beautiful, poetic writing. And it's an argument between a man and his soul. And the man wants to commit suicide, and his soul is trying to convince him not to. Because if he commits suicide, he won't go to heaven, essentially. And the man is saying, things are changing too fast. The world is not like it was. Things are moving quickly. Now, suddenly, the houses are built out of stone, the women do these things, the boats do these things, there are people from foreign lands coming in, and he can't keep up with the pace of change. So I think the sentiment that you have is in no way new. I think it's probably built into human beings, and we're just in another cycle. And if we were able to look 30 years into the future and look back at this, there might be people at a different panel talking about the artificial intelligence cycle as an example that would help them to understand whatever the hell cycle they're in 30 years. And so in that way, it's invaluable. We have to go through it because we're compelled to as human beings to go through this.
Okay, we have 40 seconds left, so your question must be less than half of that.
She can do it.
Hi. If you guys can drop your current job but have all the knowledge in AI, what would you go and start? You have no responsibilities.
Do I have infinite resources as well? Because that's the limiting factor.
Yeah, warp drive company, warp drive.
Ooh, this is tough. This is what I would build. I want a entertainment platform that is like phenomenal movies, TV shows, etc., that appeal to my emotional desire at any given moment. right? Like I want, and so like an analogy is, what if like House of Cards was great on Netflix, right? It was appointment sort of TV, everybody, but everyone's House of Cards was the same, right? What if mine was different than yours? What if my season 1 was maybe somewhat of a similar thematically, but different actors, different setting, different scene, and maybe the crux of the story, maybe it's local politics instead of national politics or whatever, right? Like, I think that level of personalization will happen at some point, and I think we'll have agency in terms of how the storyline goes and what will happen and what we'll see, and we'll be able to put pieces together. I think that's what I want. That to me is the ultimate entertainment experience.
That would be excellent. I would love to keep answering that question, but unfortunately we are not only at time's up, but actually hearing the applause from next door. So we're going to use that as a signal. Thank you so much to my panelists. Thanks to all of you for the great questions.
Thank you.